I'm Elizabeth at A Literary Princess. If you are new here, welcome. I'm a 6-year PhD candidate in English literature with a focus on Victorian women novelists. And as you might expect, I love to read. Today I have my December wrap-up for you. I read 7 books in December, and honestly, I feel like I can't really remember the ones that I read at the beginning of the month. Most of my month was taken up with reading The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope, which we will be talking about toward the end of this video. But there were other books that I did in fact read, even if I can't really remember them that well. So, let's jump in. The first book that I read was a kind of paranormal romance called What Manner of Man by St. John Starling. So this is a queer romance between a priest and a vampire. Yep. I needed something completely not Victorian, not serious, not difficult. Although I say completely not Victorian, it's inspired by Dracula, like pretty clearly. So, you know. But I just really needed something that was kind of, I'm not gonna say on the lighter side, because light isn't exactly the word I would use for the content, but just on the easier side of things. I'm burnt out, I'm tired, I'm very tired. So I just needed something really fun. And this gave me that. I had some problems with the ending. I didn't find it super satisfying. I wanted a little bit more from the book, but I ultimately gave it 3.5 stars, and I had a very good time, especially seeing the connections with Dracula. Next up was some Christmas reading. This is The Cricket on the Hearth by Charles Dickens. This was part of Katie from Books and Things, Christmas Dickens read-along. I wanted to read 3 of the 5. So it started in November with A Christmas Carol, and I have feelings about reading A Christmas Carol outside of December. I feel that it shouldn't happen. So I was like, okay, I'll skip A Christmas Carol and The Chimes, which I'd read A Christmas Carol a million times already, so that's fine. And I'll pick up with The Cricket on the Hearth and then continue on. I only ended up reading The Cricket on the Hearth, but I did enjoy it. It's a very sweet story. Not as good as A Christmas Carol, of course. It is the story mainly of a husband and wife whose names are in here somewhere. I remember we have a list of characters. Here we go. All right, John and Dot Peerybingle, who've been married for about a year. They have a baby who is less than a year old, and they are kind of an odd match. He is much older than she is, and we have several characters that they interact with who live near them, including Caleb Plummer, a toy maker, and his blind daughter, Bertha. We also have Tackleton, who is a toy merchant and is the grumpiest, crotchetiest man you will find. And what happens is that I don't want to give anything away. There is this old man who is a stranger that comes in and is staying with them, and because of something that is revealed to this man, John Peerybingle starts to doubt his wife and their relationship. It's a very sentimental, domestic, heartwarming little story. I had a good time with it. I wanted to know more about the cricket. So the cricket lives on their hearth and it chirps when like the household is happy. And it's like this kind of magical element because it then like At one point, it like turns into a fairy and is giving John Peerybingle these visions, and I'm like, what is this cricket? And I need to know more. Does everyone have a cricket? Is it just a fairy spirit that's living in the house? Is this an actual cricket? Like, I don't know. It's strange. Like, the ghosts from A Christmas Carol, like, I can understand that. Those are ghosts, cool. This is like a random cricket. I don't quite get it, but okay, Dickens. Definitely not his strongest story, but it was very sweet and I enjoyed reading it. And I'm glad that I did get to participate in a small way in the Christmas Dickens read-along. It also counted for my read a book from every Victorian year challenge that I'm doing. This was published in 1845. So that ticked off a year for me, getting those early years checked off the list. With some more Victorian literature. I started off the month like I'm burnt out and need to get away from Victorian literature, and then almost everything else that I read was Victorian or related to Victorian. This is Ideala by Sarah Grand. This is the first book in Grand's New Woman trilogy, and it is the last book in this trilogy that I am reading, so yes, very out of order. It is following a woman named Ideala who makes a bad marriage and is ultimately trying to figure out what to do with herself. I did not like this. So a large part of the problem with this is that it is told from the first person point of view of a friend of Ideala's, who's a man, and who really just doesn't get what she's doing at all. So I find it really interesting that Grand kind of throughout her development of this trilogy kind of figures out what works. So like the first person male narrator really didn't work for what she's trying to do here. In The Heavenly Twins, I'm pretty sure it's a third person narrator with varying focuses, but mostly focused on the female characters, which works better. But then we get to the Beth book, which is first person from Beth's point of view, and it's phenomenal. So like, the best way to tell a story of a woman is through the woman's point of view. Shocking, right? Yeah, I had a hard time with this one because of the narrator. He also just felt so out of the loop on things. Like sometimes he's relating events that he wasn't there for. I'm like, how do you know this? Why do you know so much detail about this? You can't know this. Like you don't know it. I don't even know his name. Does he have a name? As far as I can tell, he doesn't have a name. Anyway, so a common complaint with New Women literature was that they weren't really novels. They were almost like pamphlets disguised as novels. So like they're kind of preachy was the complaint. I didn't find that so with the Beth book at all, and only like slightly so with the Heavenly Twins, but with Ideala, I was like, oh, this is what people are talking about. Okay, I get it now. Because it really didn't feel like a story. It felt like just, here are my ideas that could have been laid out in a nonfiction pamphlet, but I'm gonna try to spin it as fiction so that more people will read it. So yeah, I did not like this one at all. I gave it 2 stars. It is very interesting to see how Grand developed as a writer from here. But that's the only reason that I would read it, honestly. Or if you're especially interested in the New Woman movement. Other than that, I think you can skip it. Just go to the Beth book. Honestly, Ideala, the character, makes an appearance in both the Heavenly Twins and the Beth book, but I really didn't find that you needed to have her backstory to make either of them work. So, yeah, 2 stars. Didn't really like it. We now have some nonfiction for my dissertation. This is Margaret Oliphant by Valerie Sanders. This is part of the Key Popular Women Writers series published by Edward Everett Root Publishers. It came out in 2020, so it is one of the more recent publications I have on Margaret Oliphant, aside from articles. And actually, even with that, I think this might still be the most recent one. So when I saw this reference somewhere, I was very intrigued to read it. And I did really enjoy it. It covers, obviously, several different aspects of Oliphant's writing. So it looks at her literary criticism. There's a chapter on mothers, daughters, wives, and widows. There's a chapter on clothes and bodies in her novels, masculinity, and then her sensational and supernatural works. I didn't ultimately find a whole lot that was new in here to me, but I do think some of the discussions on the masculinities and the mothers, wives, widows, daughters, however that chapter went, will be helpful in my discussion of Salem Chapel, which my advisor wanted me to expand in the dissertation chapter that I have written on Oliphant. So I do think it will be helpful there. It also put me onto some really helpful sources that I hadn't come across anywhere else. So I gave this 4 stars. I enjoyed it, even if, because I have done so much research on Oliphant, it was nothing especially new. But if you're less familiar with her work and want to approach it from an academic point of view, I think this is a great book to go to. Next up, we're going back to the Victorian period and for some poetry now. This is Poems by Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell by Charlotte, Emily, and Anne Bronte. I have it in this big bind up with no real cover because it's from the library. Ooh. All right. Emily's an amazing poet. Her poems were a delight. Although, I mean, not even, a lot of my favorites weren't in here. They were either published later, they were published later. Particularly No Coward Soul Is Mine was published after Emily's death. However, there are still some great ones by her in here, and some particularly notable ones. Not that I can find them. Stars is a good one. I think The Prisoner is in here. Maybe it's not. I don't know. The Philosopher is definitely in here. High Waving Heather isn't in here. I get published later, I suppose. But yeah, Emily's a delight. Anne's were fine. Like, okay. They're poems. You can see the influence of her sister. They were very close, Emily and Anne. But she's not as good of a poet as Emily. And then we have Charlotte, whose poems kick off the collection. And my girl could not write poetry. Oof, they were really painful. They were so painful. Especially the opening one, Pilot's Wife's Dream. It was super long. By super, I mean it was a few pages. But, girl, I don't want to be here. Stop. I almost DNF'd it because of Charlotte's poems. So like, Emily's poems are 5 stars. Anne's are probably like 3.5. And then Charlotte's are 1 star. So I ultimately gave the book 3 stars. I felt that seemed like an even, fair thing. Yeah, I read Emily's poetry, maybe Anne's if you're really interested. Don't touch Charlotte's. They're not good. They're not good. Amazing novelist, Jane Eyre, beautiful book. Villette, not my favorite, but I can appreciate it. She wasn't a poet. She just wasn't a poet. So, Yeah. This also counted for my reading a book from every Victorian year challenge. This was published in 1846, the year before all three of them published their first novels. So, continuing to check off those early Victorian years. Now we have the one that really took up the whole month. The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope. I loved this. I gave this 5 stars. It is a story of London in modern times for the period. So 74 to 75, yeah. And it's about the shifting social structures of British society, and it's all centered around Augustus Melmotte, an incredibly rich but kind of new money man who might not even be an Englishman as far as everyone's concerned, and he definitely probably made it through disreputable means, but because he is so rich, people that would normally not be associated with him, so like, I mean, titled people, lords and dukes, are kind of associating with him, despite the fact that they find him incredibly vulgar. He is trying to marry off his daughter Marie to somebody who will kind of help their social standing. We then have the Carberry family, made up of Lady Carberry, who is the mother, who is a writer, and then her 2 children, Sir Felix, who's just degenerate, and Hedda, who is caught in difficulties in love. We also have their cousin Roger Carberry, who is a member of the landed gentry, although he does not have a lot of money. We have his friend Paul Montague. We have so many people. This is crazy, and it all ties together so well. This was one of my top books of 2024, so I have it in my best books video if you want to hear more about that and why I think it's so good. But I loved this. It's not perfect, and I had several problems. I had several problems with the end. I was not happy with who Hedda ended up with. I was like, girl, you're a moron. He sucks. You're stupid. I was very disappointed with her because I was rooting for the other person. But alas. My favorite character ended up being Mrs. Hurdle, who is an American woman who comes over because she is engaged to a British man, and I'm not going to say who because I'm trying to keep it a little spoiler free. And that man is trying to break off their engagement. She is just headstrong and is going to get what she wants. I loved her. I'm not sure if you were entirely supposed to love her as much as I did, because there is always this, oh, well, she's American and she's kind of like not a good woman for you to marry. But I loved her. She was fantastic. I also ended up really loving Marie, who, despite her father using her as a pawn, kind of comes into her own and takes charge of her life. Fantastic. So even though I had some problems with it, I do consider this an absolute masterpiece. I just think that Trollope should have made some different decisions in regards to Hedda's story. But there we go. So yeah, this was 5 stars. Obviously one of my best books of the year. And then to close out the year with, I decided to go for something very light and easy. And this is Before Midnight by Cameron Dokie. This is a Cinderella retelling. It tells the story of a girl named Cendrillon whose mother died giving birth to her, and because of that, her father never wants to see her again. He was extremely in love with her mother. He blames her. So he goes off to court and leaves her on their estate. When he remarries a woman who has 2 daughters, they arrive and they don't know who she is and assume she's a servant. So what I really liked about this was, first of all, I thought Dokie's writing was actually really good. which is not my experience with this Once Upon a Time series. Usually it's a series of fairy tale retellings done by all different authors. And I read The Night Dance by Suzanne Wen earlier in the year, and it was just very meh. I think I gave it 2.5 stars. So I was pleasantly surprised with how good the writing was here. And that I really got invested in the characters despite the fact that it's super short. And I also really liked that it's dealing with the relationship between the Cinderella character and her father. In a lot of modern versions, particularly the Disney movie, the father gets killed off, so he's not there. In the fairy tales, in Grimm's and in Perrault's, who is the one that we're most familiar with the pumpkin carriage and the glass slippers, the father's alive. He's just letting this happen to her. So it's like, that's a little weird. So Doki says in her author's note, if Cinderella's father is still alive but takes no action to save or protect her, what might this say about both him and the woman to whom we are all accustomed to assigning the role of the bad guy? What would happen if I put the father back into the mix? So that is really interesting to me. So the stepmother isn't the bad guy here. Neither are the stepsisters. One of them's a brat, but like they don't know that she's the daughter of the house. They think she's a servant and they're treating her as such. And once they find out, their relationship is actually really nice. So that's kind of spoilery, sorry, but I mean, it's like a 100 and something page book. I can't really talk about it very well without telling you some stuff, unless I'm just not gonna say what I liked about it. But I thought that was a very interesting take to have on it, and I appreciated that a lot. And I thought this was a really good little retelling, so I give this 4 stars. So that is everything that I read in the month of December, my final books of 2024. Let me know down in the comments below, have you read any of these? What did you think? What did you finish out 2024 with? Did you enjoy them? Or did you hate them? I always love hearing about books people hated. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more of my bookish content. It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.